My name's Annabelle Munson. I'll be your host and moderator today, introducing you to our panelists and to uh, our topics for the session. Really do want to welcome back. I see a lot of familiar names and some faces from last time, so welcome. And then a special welcome to our new guests. It's so good to have you with us. If you were unfamiliar, we'll be doing this hopefully about every 2 weeks or so, having this session on a recurring basis. So we're going to focus on global operations, as we will at the top of each one of these sessions. Really, this is going to be where we take what we've learned over the last 2 weeks or so from our clients in active operations, as well as the feasibility planning we're doing, and bring that to you with some top tips and trends. We're going to touch on holiday travel today as well. This has been a popular topic as we're clearly getting into the holiday season and potential destinations and what's feasible for you right now. And of course, the most popular item, answering your questions. We got a ton of submissions in advance. We're going to try to prioritize those, and then we're going to get to what you engage with us here in chat. We're going to get to as many as we can. All right, so if everyone's ready, I'm going to get to our experts. Today, we're going to hear from Christine Van Vakes. Again, she's our Senior Account Manager, Charter Management, with a deep amount of mission management experience over the last 20 years. We also have two special guests from our regional experts, Jorge Alva with Universal Aviation Mexico, and Oscar Sanchez from Universal Aviation Costa Rica. Especially excited to have them with us today. All right, we're going to start with Christine. Top trends and hot topics. Christine, it seems like European ops and access into Europe are still at the top of client wish lists. What's the latest?
So there's three things to consider when it comes to Europe. So essential business is still very high in demand. The important thing to here to consider is that substantiating the purpose of flight is essential here. That way we can get pre-approval for your flight out there. The second item to consider is that intra-Schengen, intra-EU flights are still possible. To consider here that COVID cases are rising in the area, so you may have to be flexible with what you're wanting to do because each country is enacting a safe and an unsafe corridor. A great example of this is if you're looking to travel to Italy from France, you now have to do a COVID test 72 hours prior to arrival or within 48 hours of entry into the country. And the third thing to consider here is that we've been hearing rumors that a safe corridor may be created between New York and London via the Commercial Avenue route. Based on these rumors, this may take place between now and Christmas. If it does manifest in an actual regulation, we're hoping and we're very optimistic that it is going to be applicable to GA travel.
Great. So clearly restrictions are the theme of the day. What are your top tips and recommendations overall when it comes to dealing with restrictions?
So travel restrictions for COVID really fall into three large buckets. It's either based on departure point, 14-day travel history, or nationality. And there are some countries that are combining some of these. So superficially, it may seem that you can't go to a certain location, but upon looking into the regulation further, it would be possible. A great example of this would be Portugal. So a direct flight from the US or even Brazil to Portugal is not possible, but you may be able to do it through a third country. The NOTAM itself is written by departure point. So if you make a stop through a safe corridor, and the UK is one of them, then you would be able to get to your destination.
Makes sense. So definitely look at the details related to
Yes.
each restricted area. So on that note, rumors do abound often when it comes to restrictions and what's changing. Last time we met 2 weeks ago, Japan opening was just a rumor, and it turns out that a few days later it became a reality, but there are some significant constraints. Any details to add?
So luckily, the rumors did actually become regulation. So effective on the 1st of October, all foreign nationals that have a valid visa can enter Japan. These visas would be for things like business, medical purposes, or even study. It's important to note that your receiving party is going to have to guarantee that you do adhere to that 14-day quarantine upon entry. And also, when it comes to the visa, you have to supply a lot of documents. A couple of those that are outside of the norm would be an invitation letter from the receiving party and what they refer to as a written pledge that you will adhere to that quarantine. Once you get the visa and you look to travel to Japan, you'll have to do a COVID test within 72 hours of arrival, and you'll also have to take another test upon entry. So it is possible, but there are those additional layers that you're going to have to overcome to get there.
Once again, check the details. On another note, we're hearing more tales of woe and challenges from clients about U.S. passport renewal issues. Anything new to share there?
We've been receiving a lot of comments from our clients that for the passport renewal process that it's slowed down to a trickle, even when they're paying additional fees to get that passport process urgently. So if you do have a crew member or passenger whose passport is expiring in the next few months, I would say that you should start that process now because we don't know how long it's going to take to get that back.
Makes sense. Start early. And I think this falls in the category of things that we desperately want to avoid right now in an already challenging ops environment. Um, that's also a request from our last webinar is, can you tell us things to avoid? Can you highlight the gotchas?
So the important thing here is that there's a lot of information out there for going to an XYZ destination. And with those types of information, it's general in nature. So when people look at that information, they make a determination only to find out that it may not be possible or there may be delays in doing so. So what I would say is that communicate with your team and look at things based on scenario. So look at things as in what your nationality is for your passengers, what your departure point is, what is the purpose of the flight, where are you looking to travel. That way we can gather all this information and obtain an answer that you can use, and that way you avoid any other issues at getting to that destination.
Okay, makes sense. And the other topic that came up for us over the last couple of weeks and growing in popularity are holiday travel options during that holiday period. What do you have to share there?
So with the upcoming holidays, I'm getting a lot of questions of where can I travel to with few or little restrictions. With that, there are certain countries or locations where you can travel to based on the latest regulations. I would consider those being the Caribbean, not all, but many of those destinations, Mexico, Costa Rica, the Maldives, and French Polynesia.
Great. Well, Christine, thank you. And I think that's an excellent segue into one of our guest speakers. So Jorge from Mexico, thanks again for being with us and setting the stage to get a couple of details about Mexico ops right now. Mexico is currently open to all travelers, both business and leisure. But let's focus on those holiday travel opportunities. What's it like at the top leisure destinations in Mexico at the moment? Really that experience for travelers at those destinations specific to resorts, restaurants, etc.
Good morning, everyone. Buenos dias. Yes, Mexico has been open since the initiation of the pandemic. They haven't closed the border, so everybody's welcome to come. And we can for leisure we can break down the country in three regions. Like the Baja Peninsula, you can go to Cabo, Cabo San Lucas or San Jose del Cabo. Then you have La Paz and Loreto, which are like the main entrance into the Gulf of Cortez for cruising or sailing. Great places. Then on the Caribbean, you have, of course, Cancun. South, you will have the Riviera Maya all the way to Tulum and Playa del Carmen. And there's another new destination who's becoming very popular. Is Merida, on the west part of the Yucatan Peninsula. I mean, it's a beautiful city. It has a lot of activities. You have also on the north a very nice beach and a lot of archaeological zones to visit. So that's another destination that is becoming very popular. Then on the Pacific, you have, of course, Puerto Vallarta, another very popular one because the town is beautiful and they have several bays there. And then Manzanillo. That would be the main recommendations. Um, Mexico created a system that they call a semáforo. It's a stoplight where they have set up a color for each one of the states. Red is fully closed, orange is open only 30%, yellow is 60%, and green would be 100%. So there's a suggestion that that is changing every day. So there's a site, there's a link that you can check the status for the location where you want to go, the state, so you will know what are the conditions for those states or those destinations. It's important to mention that restaurants and hotels and all services are open based on those restrictions, 30, 60%, or 100%. But they have complied with all the measures established by the health and labor department. So you will be very safe going to those places. Um, um, Still, you will have to wear your mask when you're in public places, keep a safe distance. maintain a continuous washing of your hands, on the use of gel. Common sense things that we have seen implemented everywhere in the world. The other thing for the destinations to check is the airports operating hours, operating times, because of the COVID pandemic. I mean, they have restricted some staff, so they may have reduced hours. So it's always advisable before you fly there to check the if there's last minute changes in terms of the operating opening and closing of the airport. And also you may have an operating times of the airport, but they may be different from the service provider. Like the FBO may have reduced staff as well from the airport. The airport might be 24 hours, but they will just close at night, the FBO. So it's important again to plan. Planning is key, and so you'll be safe.
So same,
And
echoing Christine's sentiments, plan and plan it again. Operationally, as far as health requirements, what's the key thing that operators are going to experience?
well, there's a new requirement that you have to fulfill. It was established by the Civil Aviation um, office, and you had to do a risk factor questionnaire before you arrive. Mainly will ask you for general information. Then they need to know which countries you have visited in the last 14 days. If you have had any proximity or to a patient that has COVID. And then finally, if you have any symptoms, like if you have fever, if you have sore throat, things like that, they will perform a temperature test. They will take your temperature on arrival. And if it's necessary, the health official will approach you and do additional questioning. The only restriction is that you cannot come as a positive, having a positive COVID. They will
Correct.
not allow you to come into the country.
Correct.
Even though if you have some of those symptoms after the secondary questioning from the health official, they may ask you to remain on quarantine for the 14 days, and they will follow up with you during that
Correct.
period
And
of
that
time.
was one, Jorge, that was one of the questions, was the quarantine requirement. So that was good to touch on that. Well, thank you. And I'm going to take the occasion now to go to your neighbor to the south in Costa Rica. Oscar, can we get some insight from you on Costa Rica and entry requirements overall currently?
Forgot, sorry, golf courses are open, so that's another another
Key
good thing for you
important
to go there.
operational detail, golf courses are open and I bet the margaritas are flowing.
A lot.
Good. That's definitely on my
Sorry,
list.
go ahead,
No,
Oscar.
thank you, Jorge. That is a very key operational detail. Oscar, so tell us more about what's happening in Costa Rica. I know you've had some changes recently.
Yes, Annabelle, thank you, and hi everyone. Greetings from the Pura Vida country. Here in Costa Rica, things are changing for good. Fortunately, recently the government announced that as of November 1st, the borders will be open for every country. So we basically have the opportunity to for visitors for every country in the world. Some requirements are to have, in order to come to the country. But, most importantly is that for our next holiday season, people will have the chance to come.
So operationally, what are the key differences that passengers and crew are going to experience when going to Costa Rica?
Well, first and foremost, we have a brand new facility, Annabelle, for all our general aviation visitors. This general aviation terminal was inaugurated some months ago, and now it's giving the customers, a better experience when arriving into the country. And now with the COVID situation, it's providing customers, the best possible experience when arriving into the country or departing the country. having the availability to be by themselves. They don't have to commingle with commercial passengers. Brand new facilities for everyone when arriving or departing the country.
So all of the requirements are easier to fulfill in your own space. The distancing, the sanitation requirements, the pre-screening. But I did want to touch on too, just like Jorge did, the tourism sector, the resorts, the hotels, the ecotourism adventures, all of that is open, and what's the status?
Well, all that Costa Rica is very well known for, main national parks, beaches, all tourist activities are fully operational. Hotels, restaurants, are operating with some capacity measures at public spaces. But most importantly, the tourist industry, it's coming back, and we are ready to receive everyone, for the next holiday season.
Great. A quick question for you. Is medical insurance required for Costa Rica?
We do have some requirements when coming in. There is an insurance requirement that needs to have, everyone needs to have an insurance when coming to the country. A PCR COVID negative test with a maximum 72 hours is required. And there is a health pass that needs to be fulfilled when coming in. So with those three things, most of the people will be allowed to come in. And, that's pretty strong in the industry and most of the countries now.
Great. All right, well, that brings us to our questions that all of you sent in advance. Like I mentioned at the top of our session, you sent in quite a few. So I want to prioritize as many of those as I can, but it looks like we've gotten a good number of questions in via the chat. So on that note, I'm going to start rolling through the questions that we got in the last few days from all of our participants. But as a reminder, now's a great time. Please go ahead and populate any other questions that have come to mind into that chat area, because we're going to circle back to those with Louis in just a few minutes. Okay, so Christine, it looks like we're going to be picking your brain quite a bit with some of these questions that came in prior to the session. Once again, not surprisingly, a lot of interest on the topic of entry into the US for non-US citizens. We've been getting this one a lot. What are your suggestions?
The biggest thing to consider is the 14-day travel history. So outside of a valid travel document and the applicable visa, you're going to have to consider where they've come from. So in the 14 preceding days, if they come from a non-suspended region or country, then they're good to come in. However, if in that 14-day period, even if it was a tech stop to come back into the US, then they're going to be restricted entry. So those restricted regions, the suspended ones based on the US proclamation, is going to be China, Iran, Brazil, the Schengen zone, the UK, and Ireland. So even if you made a tech stop in Shannon coming to the US, it's a no-go. The only exceptions here to consider, and there are very few, is if they have a valid green card, if they're married to a US national, if they have a national interest waiver, and a couple of other things. So check that. It's very important to keep track of that travel history.
So again, know the history and plan ahead. Looks like we're going to be taking a tour of the world here with these questions. We're turning back to Europe again. Multiple questions have come in, all relating to COVID testing and then holiday travel. Again, themes we're talking about today anyway. Specifically, Italy and Germany have come up. Italy crew requirements if they're staying for a week or longer, and Germany was related to December holiday personal trip possibilities.
So for Italy, as far as if they're active crew, then they're exempt from quarantine or COVID requirements. That's regardless of length of stay. If they were there for essential business, the maximum time on the ground is going to be 120 hours. But if they were there for longer, then they're still good to go. As far as Germany, so most of Europe is restricted for US nationals. A direct flight for personal travel to Germany would not be possible. However, if you get into the Schengen zone and from there traverse to Germany, then it would be a likely possibility based on the latest. So if you went, for example, from the US, did an overnight in the UK, from there through France or Portugal, and from there to Germany, you can do that. The only thing to consider upon entry into Germany, you will likely have to do, as far as the passengers, a COVID test at the airport, and it's available at all airports. So keep a good eye on that, but holiday travel is going to be more restricted in that region, at least until further notice.
Okay. Now we're going to go back to North America. Question about Part 91 operations into Canada with a business purpose. How does that look?
So for non-Canadian nationals looking to come into Canada, the essential business is really, I guess, that mark. So even though normal business travel, for example, if your passenger was looking to look at a, I don't know, a warehouse or something before signing a contractual agreement, CanPass or CBSA may not approve that. So it's important to get all those details on what is considered essential for your passenger, and then you reach out to CanPass and they will inform you if it's approved or not. Uh, Even though Canada in the past was very easy to get into, it's now quite a task to get those approvals.
All right, so take nothing for granted. On to it again, an entirely different continent. We have an inquiry about Africa. What's the situation there and how open is it?
So each country in Africa has their own. It all depends on, like I mentioned before, what the scenario is, where you're looking to travel to, the nationality of the passengers, and of course, COVID testing if that comes up. So if you're looking to go to countries like Senegal, if you have your COVID testing, you can get in for business and or leisure. Egypt requires that you do have COVID testing 72 hours prior to arrival. Then on the other hand, you have countries such as Morocco, that if you're coming in for essential business, you need a diplomatic clearance. If you look to go into South Africa, you have to get an approval from the Department of Home Affairs. So it really, we need all those details to substantiate to see if there are possibilities or not.
Makes sense. And then I got a more general one, and this really tries to dig into the fact that, as we can tell, there's so many rules, restrictions, prohibitions, varied by country, by region, sometimes down to the region within a city in a country. How are they actually being enforced? And really, I think the heart of this is what are the legal ramifications of knowingly transporting, COVID positive or symptomatic passengers and crew?
So each country has, of course, their own stipulations and requirements to try to prevent persons that are positive from entering the country. The first hurdle here is to get that COVID testing. A lot of countries are wanting it between 48 and 72 hours out. There are some that want it at a 7-day or a 10-day, but that's for so that's the first step. Then when you're looking to travel in there, you have to submit it in advance. There's health forms to fill out, registration forms. That's another hurdle that you're trying to ensure that you're not COVID positive. And then when you're traversing to that country, a lot of the regulations are written as such, and it states that if you have passengers or crew that are exhibiting symptoms, they require you to contact the handler or the airport authority at the destination to notify them. So if you don't, and they're checked upon arrival and have, a temperature higher than normal or exhibiting other symptoms, they will likely get tested, go through further, I guess, of a health check. And then they could be quarantined on arrival for 14 days. They could be denied entry. Authorities could fine the aircraft or the operator. And if they wanted to, they could also ban the aircraft. So they're putting in all these different layers to try to prevent that from happening.
Again, lots to consider. I do want to look at the time now and just give everyone a quick heads up. So I've got 4 minutes left in our prescribed time for the session, but I do want to go ahead and set the stage. We are very happy to, like we did last time, stay on for another 5 or 10 minutes after the half hour, so about till 12:40 Central, to continue answering as many questions as we need to. So just a heads up now, totally understand some of you may need to drop off due to time commitments and other constraints. Again, this session is being recorded and we're going to send out the link in the COVID weekly email update that'll go out tomorrow. But for now, I'm going to hand it over to Lewis and see what he has to share with us from the chat. It looks like it's been busy.
Thanks, Annabelle. I appreciate it. Yeah, so Christine, first question out of the gate, rapid fire. So is there any opportunity for direct travel to France right now?
So right now, travel to France is restricted on a direct flight. You can get into France through a third country, the UK, which you want to overnight because customs in France is asking what you were doing in the UK. You want to be able to allow your passengers to state that they did, a visit to London or wherever that may be, rather than just a tech stop. So if you're looking to go direct, it's one of the 5 reasons. It's things like diplomatic, or if your primary residency, and you have to stipulate that with documentation, is France. So it's not a good option. You want to go through that third country that's going to allow you to come in the way that you want to without restricting that entry.
Thanks, Christine. Oscar, a question for Costa Rica. Do crew members need insurance and a test to enter Costa Rica?
No, crew members are exempt.
Short and sweet. All right. Moving on. Jorge, we have a question for you about Ciudad Obregón. Anything you can share about that destination? And you're on mute, Jorge.
You mentioned Puerto Vallarta?
No, Ciudad Obregón.
Ciudad Obregón. Okay. Yeah, nothing. It's just a regular airport. It's close to the Pacific. It's not a leisure destination. It's more mainly a business destination. But of course, they have nice areas that it's on the Gulf of Cortez. So it's no issue. I mean, just check the operating times of the airport. That would be my only suggestion. No more restrictions. You just have to check on the status for the semáforo for the state of Culiacan, and that'll be it.
Thanks, Jorge. Christine, jumping back to you, what can you tell us about the latest in the UK?
So the UK, the numbers are rising. So depending on the region that you're traveling to, they have additional layers of restrictions, but you can still go in there. You just have to remember that if you're coming from what they refer to as a non-safe corridor, and their list is updated on the website quite frequently, that I think the latest, Italy was removed from the safe corridor, you're going to have to adhere to that quarantine. So if you're there for 3 days, you quarantine for 3 days. The maximum time is 14 days. And then after that, you would be able to move about freely based on the area that you're at, if there are no additional layers of quarantine in place.
Thanks, Christine. Got a bunch of locations people are interested in, so I'm just going to start throwing some out to you. Samos, Greece, and St. Bart's.
So Samos is, of course, Greece is NOTAM is restricted by nationality, so U.S. nationals are barred from entry. The only way into Greece is if you get diplomatic approval through the embassy, and that's usually for essential business. I've seen potentially some persons may go there for non-business purposes. If you have the right connections and you get that diplomatic clearance, then you would be able to go in there. As far as St. Bart's, my understanding is that you can go in there. U.S. nationals are able to get in there. You have to have that COVID test, I think 72 hours if my memory serves me right. But if you're unable to get that testing at the departure point, you would be able to do it on arrival. You'll just need a quarantine, I think, for 24 hours, give or take, until you get those results.
Thanks, Christine. You talked earlier about holiday destinations. Any others that you could think of, any islands or anywhere in South America?
I mean, a lot of South America is opening up. So Brazil is open. Argentina is still closed. Unfortunately, you can still get into Peru through third country. They have a list of approved countries. I think Panama and Colombia, if my memory serves me right. Colombia is open. So it really depends on where you're looking to go. Paraguay is open too.
Great. Any concerns about Brazil and Namibia other than the obvious ops items you would need to complete?
It's just those things to consider is you have to have your, I think Brazil does not require COVID tests, and I'll have to reconfirm that. But you can still go in there as long as you meet the requirements. I don't see any restrictions to bar entry.
And what about the latest with the Dominican Republic?
Dominican Republic is wide open. No COVID test, no quarantine, no nothing. So if you want to go there, it's the place to go.
Great. And you talked a little bit about Argentina. Can you expand on that?
So right now, U.S. nationals, in order to get in there, you're going to have to go through diplomatic channels, through government approvals. U.S. nationals are barred until further notice. We don't have a date on when that may change. So it's only for that essential purpose, and you're going to have to go through those channels to get that approval in order to garnish that entry.
Great. Thanks, Christine. I'm looking at some more questions that are coming in. New Zealand.
New Zealand is closed to most all nationals, including U.S. nationals. If you get diplomatic approval, that changes things, but they've been shut down for some time. They are starting to do some flights between, I think, Australia, but it's still very restricted. They're keeping their borders shut down.
They're flying in now, Christine. So I hope you're ready. Puerto Rico.
Puerto Rico, I think I'll have to look at the latest. They were looking at potentially a COVID test within a certain period of time of entry. I think it was 5 days. I'll have to double check, but we have operators going in there quite frequently from the U.S. mainland.
A couple more for the islands. Cayman Islands and Anguilla.
Cayman, I think they're still restricted. if my memory serves me right. Anguilla, I think, also has restrictions. I'll have to look into those particular locations to be sure.
Lots of interest, it seems like, in the Caribbean. So we're getting some requests for information on Jamaica and the U.S. Virgin Islands.
U.S. Virgin Islands, you have to have a COVID test or an antigen test within a certain period of time. I think it's 7 days or 10 days. It's of course from the mainland, so you can get in there. As far as back to Anguilla, you can get in there with the COVID testing. You do need a mandatory 14-day quarantine, and I can't remember the other location that you just mentioned. There's so many.
Well, the interest is all over the Caribbean, Jamaica, U.S. Virgin Islands, Bahamas. It's
Bahamas
growing.
is always has been permitting persons. You have to do the COVID test. You have to fill out your registration online before entry to gain approval. Right now, they do require a 14-day quarantine or the length of stay in the country. Effective November 1st, you should be able to enter without that 14-day quarantine if all goes well.
All right, what it sounds like too, and I'm making an observation because we'd already talked a little bit about this, so I'd appreciate everyone's feedback. You can drop it into the chat here live while we're going. We're going to have a couple more questions, but it seems like there's a lot of interest in potentially the Caribbean and related areas. Similar, like we just started off here, we were able to kick off with Mexico and Costa Rica, but we've talked about bringing in some experts from the field out in locations from the Caribbean. So if you've got interest in that, we'd love to know, and we can hopefully build that into a session that's coming up soon. So just feel free to say, yeah, I'd like to hear more about the Caribbean or other island destinations, and we'll take that definitely into consideration. We did get one here, looks like Lewis, about Turkey.
So Turkey is possible. They don't have any restrictions, so you can quite easily go in there. I think upon arrival, they are requiring that you, they do a temperature check and I think fill out a form, but that's really it.
All right. So let's scroll back through. Lewis, I'm sure you're doing the same. U.S. Virgin Islands was also.
Yes, I meant
same story essentially.
it is one of those destinations that I would say you can travel to during this holiday period. But places like St. Kitts right now is closed. They're looking to open up at the end of the month, the 31st. With entry into St. Kitts, if that does come up, they're looking at a mandatory 14-day quarantine. So that wouldn't be your first destination. Other places like Bermuda, they will require to do a COVID test prior to entry. Upon entry, you have to do another test, and then you have to quarantine until that result is known. If both of those tests are negative, then you're free to go about your way. But I think the turnaround time on that is 4 or 5 days.
All right, that makes sense. And I am getting feedback here, both directly and through that an island session would be great. So we're going to look into that. And then I did see one more I wanted to I had a helpful suggestion. I'm sure there may be others. It's just the one that I saw since we had the island focus there for a few minutes. We had someone come back in and let us know that they had a crew in Cayman yesterday, pilots not allowed off the ramp, and it was a drop-off. Crew could not access the FBO actually. So there were some details there so that was from Ellis. Thank you for sharing that detail. That's in our chat if you'd like to take a look at his notes. And by the way, that is a great suggestion. We'd love to hear directly from you. We're getting all of these ideas and questions and the topics from our clients as we go through trip planning with them and trip execution. But here is a great thing. If you are seeing us have a conversation and we're sharing some information and you have some real life experience, I know your fellow operators would love to hear it, as would we. So please don't be shy about that. That's what makes our community really strong, especially in these interesting circumstances. So, and we're at 12:37, so I'm going to try to wrap us up in just a second, but I did get one about Hawaii PCR for non-Americans.
Well, for non-Americans, you're looking at an international arrival. So for that, it has to do with that 14-day quarantine, or I'm sorry, the 14-day travel history where they've been. But if you're not from a suspended region and you come into Hawaii, I'd recommend that you do that pre-test testing arrival that's now gone into effect as of the 15th of October. Once you get that COVID test, you submit it online with the form, and then you can bypass that 14-day quarantine. That's the same for persons coming from the mainland.
Okay, and I think one more, Jamaica has come up a few times.
Jamaica, I'm going to have to double check. Don't remember off the top of my head. Sorry.
No, no worries. And we can include that note in the information that goes out on Thursday. No worries. So wait, Lewis, did you have a few more that I missed?
Yeah, we just had one come in for Colombia, Christine. What about the requirements for there and COVID testing?
So for Colombia, you have to do the COVID testing. I think it's 72 hours prior to arrival. You have to fill out a form, and then you can travel to the destination that you want to.
And a few that also came in. Can you talk a little bit more about the Maldives and Thailand?
So the Maldives, they have you do the COVID testing. You're not allowed to move around to different hotels. I think the maximum is 2, but you have to present your confirmation prior to entry. Once you do that, you're free to go. You fill out their online form too. On the other hand, Thailand is a lot more restricted. So they have permitted now persons to come in with a visa for tourism, but only for long term. And the long term is, I think, between 90 days and 270. You have to submit a lot of documentation. When you arrive, you have to go to a government approved facility for 14 days. Not sure that's really where people want to go. And then once that time period elapses, then you're free about to move your way. But there's definitely roadblocks there to gain entry.
Great, thanks. I think that's all we have.
I saw one more on clarification regarding Italy. PAX business only 72 hours, crew have no restrictions?
So if you're essential business and you substantiate that with an invitation letter and it's approved for entry, it's a maximum of 120 hours on the ground. It's COVID testing free, quarantine free. And then once you reach that maximum time, you're going to have to depart. But it's possible to gain entry, and crew are exempt from those restrictions.
Great. Now I think we've gotten to everyone now. I hope so. But like I said, we'll double check our chat and make sure if we have something we need to follow up on, we'll get back to you if need be directly and or include it to the whole group. Quickly, just also want to thank Adam Hartley and Juan Munoz with our Global Regulatory Services team. They've been online with us answering some questions for you, getting into some specifics on the chat. So thank you, gentlemen, for your assistance and your expertise. So I know we've got some links that have been shared. Please take note of those, and I can include those as well in what goes out on Thursday. So really quickly, I know we're a little over time. Thank you for those who stayed. I am going to, again, recording comes out on Thursday. It's going to be sent with your COVID weekly email. I can't thank you enough for your time. I got a lot of feedback here in the chat about maybe an island specific session would be great. But on that note, I definitely want to hear more about what you guys want to know about. So I'm going to, as everyone starts to exit, and as I do so, let me say thank you again to our guests, Christine, Jorge, and Oscar. Thank you so much. But I'm going to post a poll that if you don't mind clicking on the answers, and this is really your opinion on what you think would be great to hear more about. If none of these fit, you're like, I'd like to hear about something else, you can send your ideas and suggestions to us at operationalinsight@univway.com. Lewis is going to drop that into our chat so you can see it. Please send us a note. We're very open and we want to make this as useful for you as possible. Again, thanks for staying a little over time with us. And I look forward to seeing you in about 2 weeks. We plan to do this again in the beginning of November.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks. Appreciate it. Oh, lots of poll answers. Thank you. I'll keep it up until everyone's out. Thanks so much.
Looking forward to see you in Mexico.